Hi, I'm Andy, and in this video I'm going to pull back the curtains and I'm going to show you exactly how you can escape 9 to 5 through property investing in 15 years or less. Using the same system used successfully by over 1,000 of our clients just like you. My promise to you is that by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly how to, one, build a portfolio plan to know exactly what properties you need and in what order to achieve your specific goals with your resources and circumstances. Number two, find the best property markets in Australia and understand what makes a good property market. And number three, effectively acquire those properties that are the right properties for you according to your plan. And just so I don't waste your time, this video is only for people who are willing to take full responsibility for their future no matter what and are optimistic, open-minded, and coachable. And you don't need to be a multimillionaire to get started, but you have to start somewhere. So if you don't have at least $100,000 in either cash or equity, you will find it really difficult to get started. And if you don't have a job or a business, this won't work either because banks require you to have an income in order for them to lend you money, and you'll need to have a yearly savings of at least $20,000 for this to work. If this is not you, then stop this video right now and go back to watch my content to learn more and get your mindset ready and come back when you're ready. Now, in the past, you either tried nothing, and we all know how that went, or you tried yourself, and not only was painful, hard, and time-consuming, but you probably didn't achieve the results you were expecting. Maybe you hired someone else, and maybe you got scammed or lied to, and even if you didn't, you also didn't achieve the results you were expecting. Now, that's totally okay. Most of the people who watch my content, just like you, and even most of my clients have gone through one or two of these three in the past. Now, this is how we do things. So we have three main teams that align with the three pillars that we discussed earlier. To create the best plans, we have an awesome strategy team that has experience creating over 2,000 portfolio plans using our own portfolio planning system and our own cutting-edge proprietary portfolio planning software. To find the best growth locations, we have the data and tech team. Most people only look in their backyard, but the chances of your backyard being the best location to invest in are slim to none. We, on the other hand, have no location bias. We go where the data tells us, and we're arguably the best at it. And last but not least, to effectively acquire the best properties, we have an amazing property acquisition team that has thousands and thousands of hours of collective experience acquiring the best properties in multiple states in Australia. Most buyer's agents either don't know what asset is best for you, or they only use one type of asset because either that's all they have access to, or they have third-party agreements, which then creates a conflict of interest. We discover the outcomes you need first, and then we reverse engineer the type of assets you need to fulfill those outcomes. So we have no asset bias and we receive no kickbacks from any third parties. Now, you're probably thinking that it's impossible to escape 9 to 5 through property in 15 years or less without starting off with millions already, or living on a tight budget, or getting lucky, or getting low interest rates, or taking a lot of risk, etc. And to be honest, most people do, including myself before I was introduced to this system. But also, most people don't succeed in property investing. So I'm going to show you what people that do succeed in property investing do. Awesome. And now I'm going to show you the first pillar of all, which is building a portfolio plan. And in order to build a plan, you must, first of all, define where you are, which is mostly cash in hand, borrowing capacity, yearly savings, and stuff like that. You have to define where you want to get to and by when and why. For example, I want $150,000 of yearly net cash flow in 15 years' time to be able to retire and spend more time with my family. And finally, you must build a plan that will guarantee that you will get there. First, you want to build capital because capital is a foundation of property investing. So you want to build a massive capital foundation first by targeting high growth properties and high growth locations, and then turn that into cash flow. Now, why build capital first? Because there's only so much cash flow you can squeeze out of one property, but there's virtually no limit on the amount of portfolio value and equity you can accumulate. So that's the easiest and most reliable way of producing tons of cash flow. Now, how much capital do you need to build? Well, the rule of thumb I like to use is to build in equity 25 times the amount of yearly net cash flow you want to achieve. And if you want to know why, I have made several videos explaining this already. But just believe me for now. And now we know what to do, which is building capital. We know why and we know how much. Now the question is, how do we build this capital? Well, let's say you have $100,000 for a deposit. You buy a high growth property. You wait until that property grows and produces enough available equity. You pull out that equity and you use it towards the deposit of a second property. Now you have two properties growing at the same time. You wait again for them to grow, and now you have available equity for another two deposits. You do that again, and you now have four properties. You wait for those four properties to grow, and you do that again and again. Now, of course, this involves taking more and more debt. So how do you make sure you are able to borrow for all these loans and you don't hit a cash flow limit? Well, that's why you need a plan to anticipate for the moments in the future where you can get stuck. Cool, so this is an example of a plan we created for one of our investors, and it's a really good example of a typical strategy. So these clients came to us and they didn't even know if their goals were achievable, and of course we smashed their goals. Here we got all these dots, which are properties that we have modeled for purchase in the future. Blue is for growth, green is for cash flow, and and yellow is for balanced. Both growth and balanced properties are properties in high growth locations aimed mainly to achieve growth and build a lot of equity. And we modeled 8 of those properties for them during the first 7 years of their journey. And what we did is model the right properties in the right order so they didn't get stuck, and we balanced their resources effectively. And then when getting closer to that target year, what we did was model the sale of all those 8 properties, obviously progressively, to then fund the cash flow properties in the exit strategy. In this case, we model commercial properties. Now, why all of this activity? Because what got you out of Egypt won't get you into the promised land. What this means is that those 8 properties generated massive amounts of equity, but even 10, 15 years after, they're not generating much cash flow at all. So once they've done what you wanted them to do initially, you let go of them and you reallocate those resources to what you need now, which is cash flow. And while doing that operation, that will take them from around $60,000 of yearly cash flow. What we got here is a cash flow graph over the first 15 years. From around $60,000 of yearly cash flow to immediately $314,000 of yearly net cash flow. And the reason is because we delayed that cash flow gratification, focused on building a massive foundation, and then released all that potential to achieve the maximum amount of cash flow. And that is not unreasonable at all. You're just going to be comfortable with delaying that gratification and building a really strong foundation. Now, what would have happened if instead of delaying that cash flow gratification and building that strong foundation, they would have decided to go for cash flow properties from the get-go? Well, they would have started to see some positive cash flow sooner, but the amount at the time in the future that actually mattered to them would have been much less. In this case, about half. So that is the real importance of building a strong foundation. And you're probably thinking that in order to build this massive growth foundation, you would have to put up with a lot of negative cash flow. But in actuality, we build these plans without surpassing the amount of yearly contributions that you're comfortable with. For these clients, we planned it in such a way that the year they had to contribute with the most amount of cash flow was only around $11,000, which was well within their capacity. Which leads me into explaining how to not get stuck, which involves having a balance of your resources and not hitting limits for long periods of time. You can see here how the cash flow goes up and down, but never beyond a certain limit. So here we balanced the resources in a way that there's never too much or too little of any resource. If the plan had been modeled poorly, they might have hit a serviceability wall while their available equity, which is here in yellow, keeps growing without them being able to use it. Or the opposite, they might hit a capital wall where their cash flow capacity and their serviceability is restored, but they don't have enough equity to do anything about it. Instead, this plan was perfectly balanced where capital was created at a similar speed than the serviceability was restored. Now, you can absolutely go and try this on your own, or you can leverage our portfolio planning system based on the theory of constraints, coupled with our proprietary portfolio planning software, and use our team of experts to guide you through the best strategy for you. Now, most people think they can just plan one property at a time, and what that results is in them hitting roadblock after roadblock and delaying their goals by 10 or 20 years or more. Or worst case scenario, never achieving their goals at all and getting stuck in one or two properties like 92% of investors do. And planning allows you to anticipate those roadblocks by choosing the right properties at the right time in the right order. Okay, so now that we have a plan and we know what to buy, we need to find out where to buy it, for which we need to learn how to find the best property markets in Australia. This is the median sales price graph of a real market in Australia for the last 40 years. So when would you rather have bought? During one of these red periods or one of these green periods? You would probably all agree that it's better to buy in the green periods before a boom and not in the red periods after a boom. However, it's baffling to me that most people, including other buyers agents, will look at the last few years of a performance of a market to determine what the market will do in the next few years. And that is a recipe for buying high and selling low. That's literally how amateur stock traders lose money. The reason so many people do this is because they don't have the tools and knowledge to look into the type of data that will tell them what these markets will do in the future. Wayne Gretzky, ice hockey legend and Hall of Famer, once said about his secret to success: "I skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where it has been." Okay, so how do you know where the market is going to be? In general terms, the main thing you want to do is to identify locations with high demand and low supply. And what this means is a lot of people wanting to buy property and not a lot of people wanting to sell their properties. And this will inevitably translate in property price growth. Then what you want to do is have a look at the three main underlying drivers of property market demand, which are lifestyle, affordability, and jobs. And literally 95% of the reasons people relocate in Australia is directly or indirectly related to one of these three. Now let's go with the first one, which is lifestyle, which is pretty self-explanatory. Do people actually want to live there? And this is not whether you want to live there, because you're different to everybody else, but are there a lot of people out there seeking that particular lifestyle? And then we have affordability, which is areas with low property prices relative to salaries. And you can think, hey, but Sydney salaries are double as much as those in location B. But if Sydney property prices are 4 times as high as those in location B, the affordability for property in Sydney would actually be half as that in location B. And the third one is jobs. So basically what you want to see is unemployment decreasing, salaries increasing, and a high expenditure per capita in projects such as infrastructure, industries, and other projects. And apart from these main things, there's a stack of other smaller things that we also check. And here's the stack. And to apply all of this, you will need data and technology. So this step is literally impossible for anybody to do on their own. You need a whole team and you need a lot of resources. First of all, you will have to have access to a whole bunch of data relevant to the stuff that we just discussed, and you'll have to know which is the right data to choose from. In our team, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars every year just in purchasing data alone. The next thing is technology. So once you have the right relevant data, you'll have to know how to interpret it. And then you'll need a team of data engineers and data scientists to translate that into a model that will tell you whether or not to buy in an area. Most buyer's agents will tell you to only buy in capitals because that might be the only thing they know, which sucks because of the lower rental yields, or they tell you to do only in renovations, which require extra cash, time, and effort. And the reason they do this is because they don't have a reliable, data-driven way of picking great growth locations. Which, to be fair, if you don't have a reliable way to pick high growth locations, those other things might be the second best thing to do. However, we do have that ability. For example, our client Rob leveraged our team to do this exact thing. We got him a property back in Feb 2022 for $430,000. And in February 2024, only 2 years later, it was valued at $657,000. That's a 53% growth in just 2 years. That is a bit more than 26% yearly growth, which is quite remarkable knowing that the Australian average is around the 6% historically, and the best performing suburbs in capital historically don't average more than 8%. And you can imagine how little Rob cared about a little negative cash flow when interest rates went up, when it only cost him $93,000 cash to get into the property, and it grew by $227,000 in just 2 years. Now, you're probably thinking that this is too good to be true, or that luck must be a high component of this. And while not everybody achieves Rob's results, our average is still really outstanding. The truth is that we have significantly outperformed same state capitals across all states and all years 100% of the time. And we have significantly outperformed same state regionals over 90% of the time. So, for example, in the last 2 years when capitals were going backwards, we were achieving double-digit yearly growth in most of our locations. So you can either grab all you've learned here and go try it yourself, or you can leverage our data and tech team on which we have spent millions of dollars in research and go straight to the jackpot. Cool. So now that you know what to buy because you built a plan, and you know where to buy because you've learned how to find the best property markets in Australia, we're going to learn how to buy. So I'm going to show you how to effectively acquire those properties. So this part has a few steps, and the first step is going to be to figure out what your purchasing structure looks like. And I have done a video where I go into more detail about this. So if you want the link, please drop a comment below or send me a DM. I also want to preface this by saying that none of this is either financial or legal advice, and please, to figure out what's the best structure for you, have a chat with your broker and your accountant or lawyer. However, this is what most of our clients do. First, they start buying trust at some point, and this is by the second or third property. And they do this to avoid hitting a borrowing capacity wall because, as a rule of thumb, in a trust, you will be able to borrow as much as that trust can service. And in your personal name, you'll be able to borrow as much as your theoretical borrowing capacity says, basically. In terms of the lending, loan to value ratio, most of our investors do between 88 to 90% loans, and they do this to leverage their money. Because once you control a property, regardless the LVR, you get to reap all the benefits of the property. You get all the growth. So the least amount of money you put down to purchase a property, the higher the return is going to be. And you can put that extra money into another property. In terms of the repayments, usually most of our investors do interest only as opposed to principal and interest. Since you're not paying principal, your cash flow position in your portfolio improves, de-risking your cash flow position, increasing the buffer, and allowing you to hold more property and grow your portfolio faster and safer. Also, from a serviceability standpoint, a lot of lenders in Australia see this as a good thing, especially if it's coupled with trusts. Now, once we know how our structuring looks like, we are ready to go and find that property. So, first thing we want to do in our due diligence is shortlist. So, basically, make a list of good candidates to be the property that we're going to purchase. In order to do this, we either go online to pages like realestate.com.au or Domain, or build relationships with agents on the ground to have access to off-market opportunities, which of course takes some time and effort to build, but you can leverage from us those relationships that we've built already. The next thing you want to do is pick up your phone and make some calls. So you want to call the selling agent and at least one local property manager that you have built a relationship with. And the kind of information you want to get from these people is things like current tenancy, appraised rent, other buyer's interests, holding costs, and other things like how's the location on a street level and such. Once you have this information, what you want to do is calculate the cash flow. So you would use some sort of spreadsheet. This is an extract of a bigger spreadsheet that we use. And you want to calculate how much cash is coming in and how much cash is coming out. Essentially, income minus expenses. So the income is the rental income, basically. And the cash out or the expenses are things like loan interest, principal repayments, if you have them, property management fee, insurance, rates, and an allocation for maintenance. So once you do one minus the other, you have the net cash flow for year one, which is usually the worst year because then rents are usually go up. And with a spreadsheet like ours, you can do many other calculations. You can put in the loan conditions, you can put in all the estimates of the purchasing cost, you can put growth projections, cash flow projections, and everything. Everything is included here and automatically calculated. The next thing you want to do is to determine the estimated value of the property. So then you can determine the price that you're willing to pay. And in order to do this, you'll need to do something that is called a CMA or comparative market analysis, something like this, where you want to compare at least 5 to 10 properties that have been recently sold or are for sale that are really, really similar to the property that you're trying to buy to then estimate the value of the property. And for example, in this case, it's just like 2 properties that have been used as a comparable, and the estimated price is somewhere between 415 and 430 or whatever. Now, up to here, all of this is desktop due diligence. The next step would be to actually get a physical pre-purchase inspection. And in order to do this, either you go physically yourself, but you probably live far away. So you either pay someone to go and do this inspection for you, or leverage these property manager relationships that you have built to get them to do that pre-purchase inspection for you for free. Usually this is quite symbiotic because what they do is they do it for free and then they have the opportunity to pitch their property management service to you once you secure the property. And usually you would want to go with them anyway if they're doing all that work for you. What you want to do is give them a really detailed checklist of all the things you want them to check in the property. And these are just some examples of things that we get them to check. The last step would be to actually secure the property. So the first step of securing the property would be to negotiate. So what you want to do is find out what will get the deal done. So what things are important to the seller or the owner? Well, it could be price, but it could also be ease and speed of transaction, no or shorter finance clause. It could be other professional, personal, or financial reasons. You never know. So find out what's actually important to the other party and what's going to get the deal done. And especially if those are things that you don't mind giving up, but will then get the deal done because they're really important to the seller, that's how you get deals done. The next part is the contract phase. So before signing the contract, you want to check a few things. You want to have a look at the title and look into things like covenants, easements, council approvals, strata reports, etc. You want to have a look at the standard and special conditions of that contract. So the standard conditions are really different between different states. So you want to really understand how contracts work in different states. And the special conditions, honestly, are up to both parties. You have to pay attention to whether the seller has put any special conditions, or if you want to put any special conditions. Of course, the less amount of conditions you put and the more you're willing to accept the seller's conditions, you will have more leverage. Now, once you go under contract, you go into what's called the conditional phase, which building and pest and finance have to be finalized. For the building and pest, you must know who to hire for those inspections. You must know how to manage them, how to get the right answers from them and right information. You would also know how to read the building and pest reports and how to interpret them, and to know which things you can renegotiate with the seller and which things you can't. Then the last part would be the settlement. So right before settlement, you want to get a pre-settlement inspection done, and this usually is done by the same person that did that pre-purchase inspection for you, and that also has its own checklist and stuff. You would also want to manage your conveyancer. This is probably the moment where your conveyancer is going to be more active with all the paperwork to make sure everything is all good for settlement. And then the last step, once the property settles, you want to rent it out if it's not rented already. And for that, you'll have to manage your property manager. Now, as always, you can go ahead and take this and do it on your own, or you can leverage a team like ours that has gone through all the training already and has gone through thousands and thousands of hours of collective experience and trial and error to learn how to do this optimally. Cool. So if you're an aspiring investor who wants to escape 9 to 5 in 15 years or less without relying on luck or living off of instant noodles or taking a lot of risk or going into an infinite trial and error loop, then go ahead and send me a DM on Instagram with the word pillars, and we'll book in a call where we will go over where you are right now, where you want to get to, and if we're a good fit, then we can talk about the next steps and I can show you how to get started. And again, this is only for people who are open-minded, committed, and coachable, who have at least $100,000 in cash or equity and want to achieve financial security through investing in property. If this is not you, please don't book a call. I really, really don't want to waste your time. If you think property growth is something that cannot be predicted, or if you're afraid of a bit of negative cash flow, or if you think you can't escape 9 to 5 with property investing, or you're not willing to invest in your future, or if you're not willing to leave all your preconceived ideas behind, then don't book a call with us. In that case, then go back and watch more of my content and get some more value before coming back and booking a call so we can get straight to action. So there are two directions we can go from here for you to get the results that you want. Option one, you go ahead and take this information that I gave you and try it for yourself and invest all the time into learning, testing, trial and error, and building or acquiring your own tools, systems, and processes and resources. Or option two, we can hop on a call and discuss how we can shortcut all of that guesswork by leveraging our team to get it right in the first try based on what we've tried and tested already on over 1,000 investors with 100% success rate. This way you can get to $100, $150, $200,000 in yearly cash flow in 15 years instead of 30, 40, or never. So if that sounds like you and you're 100% sure you want to take option two so you can get much better results, easier, faster, and with much less risk, then drop me a message on Instagram with the word pillars and we'll have a look at where you are, where you want to get to, and how to get there. Worst case scenario, you leave the call getting tons of value and with a much better understanding if your goals are achievable and a basic plan to get to those goals.